I was born in Maryville, Missouri, and we moved when I was very small. We moved to Nebraska, in mid-Nebraska near a small town of Cairo. We were very, very poor. We weren't able to afford a really nice farm. And that was back in the time when we didn't have electricity. We had 2 oil lamps in the house. We had pump water from the pump out front, had an outdoor toilet. My father hadn't done anything but be a farmer, and we lived close to a plant that built crates to haul bombs during the war. And my dad got a job there for quite a while until that closed down and the war was over and they didn't need those anymore. And then he had a tough time finding work, but he started shingling houses for people. My mother was not really very well able to work outside the home, but she did babysitting and babysat for kids of some of the teachers in town. And so she loved that, and they all loved her. My folks were very uneducated, and we were so poor. We had this old car that we drove that always had flat tires. So my dad said to me, before I could drive, I had to learn to change the tire. And then, in order to keep working on doing that, well, he made a game out of it, and he timed me to see how long it would take me to change a tire. Because we had a lot of country roads out there, and when I went to my grandmother's, so I'd be out in the country, and he was afraid I'd get a flat tire and I'd get stalled out there somewhere. I was out there, it happened to me one day on the way home, and I saw a car coming. I thought, oh no, somebody's gonna stop and wanna help me, and I can do it a lot faster than they can. It was for my father. I think that my father always felt a little bit less than, like he wasn't making it, because we lived very close to my grandparents, my father's family, and they're his 2 brothers, and they were wealthy. But my grandfather had disapproved of my father marrying my mother because she came from a very poor family, so they never did help us out. They drove new cars every year, and they were in a big farm and made lots of money, and we were just really working at trying to make a living. I did not recognize that because my mother was so nice to them. At least once, maybe twice a month, she had them in for dinner on Sunday. They came to our home for dinner. My mother made her, she was just amazing cook, so she made one of her fantastic dinners, and what I didn't realize until I was older was that at those meals my mother and my grandmother never once spoke, and how she did that just amazed me. I was probably in college before I knew that. I know that when I did find that out, I really resented my grandfather. And I was close to my grandmother, and it was very interesting to me because there's my mother at home with me, and I'm saying, I want to go out to Grandma's tomorrow. And she'd say, okay. And I thought, what must she feel about that, you know? But I didn't know any of this. Had I known, I wouldn't have done that. But when I later did find out about that, and when my grandmother passed away, my brother and I and the neighbors came over and said, you guys, you and Jim want to ride with us, because I had gone home from school teaching. And we said yes, so we went with them to the funeral. When we got up to the door to go into my grandma's funeral, a man was standing there, and he said, the boys, they called him, the 2 brothers, said that the family's downstairs, and I said, we're not family. And we went into the church and sat on the opposite side from the family. And I wish my parents had talked more. They told us nothing, but my parents lost their first child, baby, when she was just very small, and my mother, I guess, had a really nervous breakdown over that. And then they had my brother, and then when I came along, We were in Missouri by then, and my mother got news that her mother in Oregon was dying. And the doctor would not let her travel because of her pregnancy. And so she never saw her mother again. And there was always something between me and my mother I could feel, but I had no idea what it was. I mean, she did all the right things with me. She never once hugged me that I remember in my life. She didn't tell me she was proud of me. I kept thinking, okay, this time she's going to tell me she's proud of me. I certainly thought when I got my PhD that she would tell me that, but she didn't. The first time I found out I'd had a sister was we were out in Oregon one time, and out here, and visiting relatives, and we went to the cemetery. And I looked down, and they were looking at my grandmother's probably, where she was buried. And I was walking down the aisle, and I looked down, and there it said that this baby's name, and daughter of Augie and Violet Sorensen. And I thought, what? This was my sister? They had another girl? They never told me? But I knew better than to bring it up in front of my mother, because she just wasn't totally able to handle things. One of them was the music teacher that I had. I went to talk to her one day and asked if the school had any instruments that I'd like to play in the band. And she said, I'm really sorry, but we don't, because they generally just had like the tuba and the drums and stuff. And she said they're all being used, and so I said, okay. I came home from school one day, and my dad said, the music teacher called today, and she wants to come over this evening. Do you know why she's coming? And I said, no. And I hadn't told them that I wanted to play, or that I'd gone to a music teacher, because I knew they couldn't afford it, so I wouldn't have thought of saying that to them. So she came over that evening and came down to our basement house that we lived in, and I was kind of embarrassed, always kind of embarrassed about that little basement house. But anyway, it's very nice. She sat down and she said, and after Dad had introduced everybody, she said Marilyn came to me and said that she would really like to play in the band, but we have no instruments. And I've searched around, I've found a used trombone. And if you could afford to pay $5 a month on that, I could get that for Marilyn. And my dad said, we'll make that happen. And I practiced that horn so much. I took lessons, of course, at school. During the summers, I paid for my own lessons. And I practiced on it so much that my mother made me go out in the yard because she couldn't stand it. And I've always wondered since then what the neighbors must have thought. No one ever said anything. But that instrument was my way to go to college. I felt that I was picked on in school. I don't know why. It was my attitude, maybe. I think I thought we were being looked down on, and that I was a little bit, maybe not always overly cooperative, especially with the men. But I had some really bad situations. One in which I was sitting in history class one day, and the history teacher said, Marilyn, quit cheating off of so-and-so's paper. And the whole class laughed. I mean, they know that. In all of my classes, I was one of the best students, and he was one of the poorest. And I said to the teacher, and this is what I did frequently, I said, I was not cheating off of his paper, and you know it. And he said, don't talk back to me. I said, well, you know, and they laughed again. And I said, well, you know that that's not true. Why are you saying that? He said, go to the principal's office. I said, gladly. And I got up and walked out with the principal's office. Now that happened to me in 2 different classes. I was in math class one day, and my girlfriend and I, that probably one of my best of 2 friends, we were talking in class, and he said, Marilyn, quit talking in class. I said, I was not the only one talking. He said, do not talk back to me. I said, I was not the only one talking. He said, go sit in the back of the room. I said, I will not go sit back in the back of the room. And he said, then go to the principal's office. And I said, gladly, and I walked out. Now, what none of those teachers knew is that I babysat for the principal and his kids. And they their kids loved me. They really liked me. And so that was just, he'd say to me, he said, Marilyn, are you here again? I said, yes, but I can't take the way they treat me. Well, I think my parents taught me to be honest, and I saw that they were pushed around, and I was not going to take it. And so, you know, I kind of got myself in trouble sometimes a little bit, but I never felt bad about what I had done afterwards either. Well, I recognized like that nobody else in the class would have said what I said. Nobody would have talked up to the teachers the way I did in several situations. But I also, there was a couple times when I think I spoke up inappropriately. And before I graduated from high school, I went in to talk to the home ec teacher. And I said to her, may I talk to you for a minute? And she said, yes. And I said, I think I have been rude to you on several occasions. And I wanted to come in and apologize for that. I did what I thought was right, but I always felt a little bit guilty about it because I knew that I was doing something that no one else was doing. And so I kind of wrestled with that somewhat, but I still thought that I would say to myself afterwards, but I was fearful because I wonder, you know, when will I know when I'm not doing what I'm saying, what I'm supposed to say, and am I going overboard? But at the time, I certainly didn't feel that way. But I just wasn't sure. But self-esteem, the word self-esteem wasn't around. There was no such knowledge of that term even. There was not a lot of positivity in my home. My dad would praise me if I hit a home run or did well playing softball. They came to all my events, always. They just didn't say anything afterwards. My mother would say, well, I've heard her word so many times, well. I'd come over after a volleyball game and I'd done really well, and she says, well. I wanted to say, well, what? But that just didn't happen. So I praised myself. I said, good game, Marilyn. I remember one day out on the playground, I was playing over with some kids one place, and there were some others over away from there, and all of a sudden we all heard this howl from this boy, and I ran over there. Everybody else stood back looking at him, and he was laying on the ground crying, and I said, Arthur, just lay still, I'm here, it's Marilyn. I'm going to pull up your pant leg now and see what's going on with your leg. And his knee had been split open. And I said, it's going to be okay, just stay here, I'm going in to get the teacher. Everybody else just stood there watching. And I got up, I ran as fast as I could. I said, you got to come, Arthur's been really hurt. So she ran back out there with me, and then I think she sent me back in to go get somebody else. And it's bothered me for several years now, wondering whatever happened to Arthur. And I have no idea, I don't know what his last name was or anything. So I remember things like that when I see things that were so inappropriate or hurtful to someone so unnecessarily, and the way that some of the poor kids were treated, I thought, in school, ignored. I wouldn't say they were put down, they were just like they weren't there. Oh, it was when I was in college. But I recognized, when I was a school teacher for years, I recognized that there were things that I could do to help kids feel better about themselves. I tried to give kids opportunities that they might not have otherwise. And in this one school, I went to the music teacher and asked, or to the music teacher, I was a music teacher, went to the superintendent and said, could we put on a Broadway musical? He said, Marilyn, do you really think we can do that in this little town, this little school? I said, I think so. I think we've got the skill here. And so we put on Sound of Music, and the next year we put on South Pacific. Well, so in choosing somebody for South Pacific, I chose this girl who had no friends, rough, tough gal, and she played Bloody Mary in South Pacific. A few years ago, she called me. I was in Portland. And she said, Dr. Sorensen, this is Cheryl Sutter, do you remember me? And I said, of course, Bloody Mary, I remember you. And she said, she was like kind of tickled, and she kind of chuckled, and she said, well, I'm in Portland. I said, you're in Portland? And she said, yes, and I'm here with my husband. I wondered if you could come and have dinner with us. I said, well, of course. So I went and had dinner with him, and I said, what are you doing here? And she said, in Portland, what are you doing here? And she said, I came to find you. She said, when you gave me that part in South Pacific, it made me realize I was somebody. And she said, I probably would have never married my husband or anything if that hadn't happened. And she said, I just came to thank you. She said, I've been wanting to come and find you. Well, that was a big one. That was the biggest one, probably. But yeah, I was pretty aware that I had a lot of students that really kind of changed while I was working with them, whether it was music or I was coaching athletics or whatever it was. You know, my goal was really to help kids feel better about themselves and feel that they could accomplish something. It wasn't until I was in college and I was doing some study for some, probably for something I had to do for class, and I ran across these things on the web of these educated, highly educated people who had writing theories about self-esteem. Now they were the kind of things that weren't very practical. And so, but I read some of that, and then I kind of got in my head, I think, after that. And I started thinking, I have low self-esteem. And I remember one night when I was singing at church on Sunday evening, and 3 women came up afterwards and said to me, oh, thank you so much, that was so lovely, and all that. And I said, to myself, I said, yeah, right. They're just doing this because they think they're supposed to. This is what you're supposed to do when you have a singer come to church. And so I got home that night and I thought, Marilyn, why do you do that? You do that all the time. You just cannot take a compliment. You just really cannot really believe it. And do you really think those people came up because they had to? And I said, no, they came up because what they said they thought. And so I've got to change this thing I'm doing. So I started realizing over a period of time there all the ways that my thinking was affecting me and how I saw it affecting people around me. I said to a friend one night, I said, you know, you're really an underachiever. And she said, well, that wasn't very nice. I said, actually it was. I said, I'm trying to say to you that I think you could achieve a lot more if you just believed in yourself. And in my counseling, when I was still doing counseling, I was trying to help people see that. So then I went on to get my psychologist license. And after a while, I got into it a little bit more, the diagnostic manual, and I saw that what they call low self-esteem is not low self-esteem. So I gave up my psychologist license. I said, I cannot do this. I cannot be a psychologist and work with people with low self-esteem because I can't agree with this. And so then I started working individually with people and then decided to write that book. And when I wrote the book, it just took off like wildfire. And I just started having calls and started working with people all over the world. I mean, I worked with people other countries and other states, and it was just like kind of amazing. And 1 week after, and then I self-published, and then I realized, well, now I've got more to say. I'm going to have to write another one. And but also after the first book, I got a call from someone on the phone, and he said, I'm the attorney for Book of the Month Club, and we would like to buy the rights to your book to print them in their way that they do it. And I said, yeah, right. I thought, you know, whoever's playing a joke on me, this is not funny. He said, well, he said, I've got a check here for $4,000. Would you like to have it? I said, yes. And then I had calls from 3 different countries, from publishers in 3 different countries that bought the rights and printed the book in their own languages. And that just all happened like just zip, 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 you know. I just couldn't believe it was happening. I mean, this is happening to me? I'm just Marilyn Sorensen from Cairo, Nebraska. I've always just been kind of shocked by what has gone on in my life. I've had an amazing life. I've been able to do more than I ever thought I would, coming from where we came from. And I've traveled all over, spoken in 60 major cities in the U.S. and Canada, and I love what I do. I think it forms in childhood. It's usually, I believe, the results of parenting. Oftentimes not just spending enough time with a child, not taking enough interest. I had a couple I worked with a few years ago. They called me, wanted to talk with me, and I met with them, and they had 3 small children who were acting out, really acting out, everywhere they went. And they said, you know, we just need help. So I asked the father, how much time do you spend with your children when you get home at night from work? Because the mother was at home. He said, I'm just so tired. And I said, do they want to spend time with you? And he said, yes, but I just am too tired. I said, well, I'll tell you what. Do you want to have 3 juvenile delinquents? Because your responsibility is to spend time with your kids. And I want you to agree with me tonight, that you will spend 15 minutes each night with each boy, doing whatever they want to do for their 15 minutes, every night when you come home. Will you do that? Because their lives are going to be ruined otherwise. He said, I'll do that. I went back to see them 2 weeks later, or met with them wherever we met, and I said, how's it going? And he just grinned from ear to ear, and the wife did too. They said, we have no problem with him now. Just that little bit of change. Well, it was a big change for him, but just recognizing that changed those kids' lives. What I realized is that a lot of people just don't understand how they're contributing to their kids developing low self-esteem. I want you to ask yourself, sentence 1, can I say that that is true based on fact, truth, or history? Because if it's not based on fact, truth, or history, then it's just a story you made up. And so I explained to them more about what those terms are. But that's the best way for me to help them. Like if somebody says, well, I'm not going to apply for that job because I know I won't get it. I say, well, I guess if you're going to tell yourself that, you probably won't go apply, and you're right, you won't get it. But tell me, based on fact, do you know factually that you're not going to get it? Well, no. Truth? Is that a truthful statement? Do you know it to be true? Well, no, I guess not. And historically, do you never get anything you try for? Well, no. Oh, well then you just made that up, didn't you? You just made up a story. So let's correct the story. So I do that over and over with them, and that's their assignment. I had a client that came to me, and he was in the worst shape of anyone I've ever worked with. And he was a pharmacist, educated man, married with 2 kids. Found out he was, kind of abusing his wife, or at least not being very nice to her. And he wasn't treating his kids very well, and he'd been out of work for months, and he'd been to all of these different doctors, and they didn't know what to do with him. And so he went to see a counselor in Portland, and he said I shared these problems with him, and he said, and I'm serious, I may take my life if I can't get some help. So the counselor gave him a copy of Breaking the Chain of Low Self-Esteem, and he said, did you not hear what I've been saying? I have serious problems. I'm about to commit suicide, and you're giving me a book on self-esteem? And he said, would you please just go home and read this? Just go home and read it. So he called the counselor the next morning, and he said, I stayed up all night, I couldn't put it down. He said, that book is written about me. He said, where is Dr. Sorensen? He said, she has an office down the hall from me. So this man came in to see me, really nice young man. And He told me his story, and he said, I want you to know you're my last stop. If you cannot help me, I'm going to take my life. Promise me you will not do anything about that. And I said, I promise you that if you will do everything I ask you to do, and you give me 4 months, and you don't see a change, I will not stand in your way. He looked at me like, are you kidding me? I've been to all these doctors, and you're going to tell me you're going to make changes in 4 months? I said, yeah, you and I together. So we started working together, and we worked together, and we worked together, and at the end of 4 months, I said, well, our 4 months is over today. Where are you on a scale of 1 to 10? And he said, I'm at a 4. He said, this is really working. I said, yeah, and we're not done. He said, I know. Books have been a great way for people all over the world to learn from one another. It's interesting because I've on more than one occasion said I'm writing my last book now. And I said that with the one I'm writing now, and I already have ideas for 2 more. I don't know if I'll get around to doing those or not, but well, the first book I wrote, it was interesting. I went upstairs. I was in a house that had two levels, and I would go into this one room, and I'd sit down at my computer, and I would type until I thought, okay, I need to now go back and read this. So then I would go downstairs, and I'd go outside, sit on the deck, and I'd read it, and I'd make marks on it. I had to get away from it to go somewhere else to read it. And then I'd go back up, and I would get another cup of coffee, and then I would make all the corrections. Then I'd go on writing, and I would do that all day. Just upstairs, downstairs, upstairs, downstairs. Maybe stop and get a sandwich or something. And I just loved every minute of it. And I do when I'm writing. I'm an animal lover. I've been down to San Francisco, to the zoo, and I spent a lot of time there. I was with some friends, and I would say, you guys go ahead, I have to stand here and look at the zebras for a while. My books have done so well that I've been able to do things I would never have imagined I could do. I would never have thought I could go to Europe, for instance. Just never have thought about that. And then, you know, I've just been so many places now. I mean, I went up to northern Vancouver Island and hired somebody to take me out fishing and caught a 30-pound salmon. I've got a great picture of that in my house. I just have ideas of what I want to do if I have time to do it. I've traveled all I want to travel. I've been able to go to Europe 3 times. I've seen the United States. I've spoken in 60 major cities for a company that asked me to do that, and then they would let me stay and go spend time doing whatever I wanted to do. And so I've done the travel. I don't have nowhere I need to travel. I guess as a person who lived her life as best she could in trying to help others. And never expecting all of this to happen. Just being, you know, people talk about how pleased and excited they are and all these kinds of things, how helpful the book is, and I'm as shocked as anybody that this happened to me. I never would have expected this. My mother found out that I'd gotten kicked out of classes, and I didn't know she knew. And I think she really held that against me for a long time, that I was just, and she had this idea that I was totally different from who I am, that I was kind of a rebel rouser, troublemaker, so forth. And I just stood up for what I thought was right, and it wasn't always popular. I'm fortunate, that's it, I'm fortunate. And in so many ways in what has gone on in my life. I've had a wonderful life. And I don't know what else to say but to thank you for doing this too, to support my work and get it out to more people.